The problem now was what to do with the infiltrators. Roosevelt, who had not been told how the Germans were caught, had no doubt on that score. The 2 Americans, he said, were guilty of high treason, just as guilty as it is possible to be. The other 6, he noted, had landed in naval gear but had been arrested in civilian clothes. This, he said, in a memo that he wrote himself, was parallel to the famous Revolutionary War cases of the British spy Major Andre and the American spy Nathan Hale. Both of them had been hanged. The infiltrators should be tried by court-martial and executed immediately. The only question, he said to an aide, was whether they would die on the gallows or by firing squad. Roosevelt's aim in demanding a fast execution was to send a signal both to Germany and the American public that the United States would not tolerate infiltration. The fact that it had been so easy to introduce saboteurs into the United States revealed a huge hole in American civil defense. A strong message was needed to counteract this gap, or at least direct attention away from it. Roosevelt had no intention of allowing the courts to stand in the way. "I want one thing clearly understood, Francis," he told his Attorney General Francis Biddle. "I won't give them up. I won't hand them over to any United States Marshal armed with a writ of habeas corpus. Understand?" Biddle understood. As he himself wrote, it was obvious that the reliance of the public on their government would be immeasurably strengthened if these would-be saboteurs were disposed of promptly. The difficulty was that despite Roosevelt's certainty, it remained unclear just what crime deserving the death penalty the men had committed, or what sort of court should put them on trial. The infiltrators had not blown anything up, nor taken any steps after landing that indicated they might. Biddle put the problem succinctly. If a man buys a pistol intending murder, that is not an attempted murder. The scion of an old Philadelphia family and a graduate of Groton and Harvard like Roosevelt, Biddle was a liberal, and by the standards of government service, a sensitive person. Roosevelt enjoyed teasing him. On one occasion, while the president was preparing his State of the Union message, he sent for Biddle and told him, in the pretense of his closest advisers, that he was planning to suspect freedom of speech, or suspend it rather, for the duration of the war. The group watched impassively as Biddle, who was completely taken in, declaimed against the idea, offering a vehement defense of civil liberties in wartime while pacing up and down. Biddle now understood the likelihood that the saboteurs' case would come before the Supreme Court, and he welcomed the chance to argue it there. "We have to win in the Supreme Court, or there will be a hell of a mess," he told Roosevelt. "You're damned right there will be, Mr. Attorney General," Roosevelt replied with a grin. Biddle adopted an aggressive legal strategy that was aimed at making the conviction fast and sure and keeping the courts out of the case. In lieu of a court-martial, which he would have to follow, rules dating back to the 18th century, he prepared creating a special military commission which could set its own rules of procedure and impose the death penalty without requiring the unanimous agreement of its members. Roosevelt agreed. For good measure, Roosevelt's order declared that the saboteur's case could not be reviewed by any court. Over the protest of the War Department, Biddle chose to prosecute the case before the tribunal himself, so that he could appear before the Supreme Court if the defendants tried to reach the court. Following Roosevelt's lead, Biddle charged the men with violating the international laws of war by entering the United States without their uniforms. Then he added several other charges, including conspiracy to commit violent acts, which of course the saboteurs had not yet performed when they were caught. A special military commission needed special members. Biddle decided to ask Henry Simmons, or Stimson, the Secretary of War, to sit on the commission as its chair. On June 29th, Stimson had dinner with Felix Frankfurter and asked his opinion on how to proceed. Stimson, easily the oldest person in the cabinet, owed his post to Frankfurter. Frankfurter had repaid the man who gave him his first government job by urging Roosevelt to bring Stimson into the cabinet for his second stint as Secretary of War, more than 20 years after his service under Taft. The argument had been that Stimson had the most relevant experience of any living American and that he was a Republican, assuring bipartisanship.
Well, you see that manila envelope right in front of you?
Yeah. Oh, is that no?
No. Manila envelope, yeah.
This one?
There. Now move it out of the way.
Oh, okay. How's that?